You are listening to the Wool Academy podcast. This is episode number 69.
Hello and welcome. My name is Elisabeth van Delden, and once a week we talk to an industry expert from the wool industry supply chain from farm to fashion and beyond, delivering strategies and insights to be successful in wool and showcasing those beautiful stories wool has to tell. David Mitchell is the National Wool Manager for AWH based in Australia. AWH handles approximately 50% of the Australian wool clip that goes through auction. David, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Thank you for your time. How are you?
Thank you, Elisabeth. I'm very well.
Excellent. I just gave a very brief introduction, so please tell us more about yourself and the work that you do.
Okay. I've been in the wool industry for a number of years now, starting with Elders, one of the Australia's leading wool brokers back in the 1980s. And when there was a lot of wool on the market back then, and we were heavily involved in the broking and rehandling of the wool clip for Elders at that time. And then in the early 90s, BWK came to Australia from Germany and commenced their combing mill here in Geelong, Geelong Wool Combing, and that provided an opportunity to join them. And we were heavily involved again in early stage scouring, combing and top making. Unfortunately, Geelong Wool Combing closed their doors in the early 2000s, and that provided an opportunity to go into the wool carpet industry. And we got involved in yarn manufacture, dyeing, design of carpets and the like. And recently the opportunity came to go back to where it all began with AWH. And here I am today. Talking to you.
Well, you saw then pretty much like all different kinds of aspects of the supply chain from the beginning all the way to yarn making. Wow. Can I ask you why you entered the wool industry?
Well, I'm off the land from South Australia. My parents managed a considerable sheep station in the southeast of South Australia. So I've always had a connection to the land and learning more about the wool fibre.
Okay, so a lifelong career in wool, as it sounds. That's wonderful. And now tell us a little bit more about AWH and what kind of services do you offer?
Yeah, as you said in your introduction, Elisabeth, AWH, we are a large logistics service provider here in Australia. We have 14 wool stores across the country, and in total some 700 to 750,000 square metres of warehouse under cover. Of the wool that we handle, we probably consume maybe 50 to 60% of that square meterage, and that varies throughout the season as the clip is busy or larger during the springtime, and not quite as busy in the autumn time. So what we do, we handle wool for the brokers. So our customers are the large broking houses here in Australia, and they charge us to receive the wool for the grower, prepare the wool for sampling and testing through our core lines, and providing samples for the show floors in our wool selling centres in Fremantle, Melbourne and Sydney. And then we provide the auction facilities in the sale rooms, and then post-sale we engage the wool buyer as our customer for delivering the wool to the terminal here in Melbourne or Sydney, and also Fremantle in Western Australia. And we also provide a shipping and documentation service for our wool exporting customers who may wish to engage us to take the wool from Australian terminal through to a main port destination. So we're really pushing a lot of wool around, Elisabeth, but also we do handle quite a lot of cotton, which doesn't come under my charter, but we would nearly probably handle more bales of cotton annually than we would wool. So that's pretty much what we do in a very brief introduction.
Okay, yeah, and let's dig maybe a little bit deeper. So can you maybe take us, we have one bale of wool that sits on a farm. So how would that journey be? And how do you also make sure that you all can always know where each bale of wool is?
Every bale of wool is accurately recorded from the time it's received, and we know exactly where he is at any point in the whole process. So primarily, when the bale comes in to us, he's marshalled up with the rest of his friends in the clip, and when the clip is complete, the broker advises us that the clip is complete, and we're giving some documentation to reflect the way that the wool is to be lotted or presented for sale. So then we match up the wool clip as physically as received against the paperwork that he has provided us. And sometimes there's a few problems there with duplicate bales or misdescriptions. We tidy all that up for him, and then we mark the wool into various lots as requested. From that point, the wool then goes to a really large sortation machine, and the bales are fed into that, and they're identified by their lot number as they go through the machine. So all the lots come out in their presentation for coring or sampling. So from the sortation machine, the wool will then be presented to the core lines, which is where we take a sample of wool for the grower and the buyer to inspect prior to sale, and that grab sample is also used for length and strength measurement through the Australian Wool Testing Authority. And then the bale goes through to the scales, is weighed, which is the official weight, and then goes on to the coring process where we take a core sample of every bale, part of every lot, which is combined and goes off for the micron and yield testing. After that, the bale's tucked away into a storage location, and he's not touched until the wool is sold, and we receive an instruction from the buyer to move it for shipment. The bales are then brought out for a shipping order. They're marked in accordance with the bull buyer's instruction at the wool warehouse, and then from there they're transported to our dumping and packing facility, either in Melbourne or Sydney and Fremantle, where they're consolidated, either packed or dumped into a ship, into a container, and then the container's sealed and sent to the terminal for shipment. So that's it, Elisabeth.
Well, that sounds like a long journey. And I have one question to clarify. So a wool clip would be the whole wool that comes from one farm, and then a lot could be several clips together. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, the wool clip comes from one farm, and the lot is the wool as determined by the wool classer, and how that wool is to be presented for sale. So you may have 100 bales in one clip, and a lot might be 6 or 7 or 8 bales as classed in the wool shed, and we will test those wools as instructed to us by the broker.
So a lot would typically be smaller than the whole clip.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah, the average lot size in Australia, I think it's somewhere around 6 to 6.5 bales. on average, somewhere around there. Yeah, it varies.
Okay. And then they're also sold in lots.
Yeah, they're sold. They're lotted into a catalogue, and then the wool catalogue is electronically transmitted to the wool buyers. There's a hard copy available to them. They go along with the catalogues, electronic or hard copy, and inspect each sample on the show floor. They make their own assessment on how well the wool will perform, either at scouring or combing, and then they will direct those wools as they see fit for purchasing, and then batching for a shipping order if they're successful in buying.
Okay. Well, that already brings us to the auction floor, or auction room. Tell us a little bit more how that actually works. How should we imagine the auction?
Well, the auction room is an open cry auction, and it's been done that way for a very long time, and it's quite a simple process, and it's well tried and tested, and it works, and it's quite simple. The catalogue is presented in a sale order as the wools are inspected, and then after the wools are inspected, they all go into a classroom of sorts, Elisabeth, and the auctioneer will have the catalogue in front of him, and he'll have 10 or 15 wool buyers in this classroom setting, and he will call the lot number and an appraisal value or a value in cents per kilo, and then the wool buyers will compete or shout their prices to the auctioneer of what they're prepared to pay, and when the bidding stops, the last person with his price is the winner of that particular lot, and this goes on at the rate of maybe 300 lots per hour. So if you're doing 6 bales per lot, you're probably selling nearly 2,000 bales per hour in the auction room.
Okay, and how long are the auctions for? Like how many hours each?
Oh, well, the auction room, there's 2 auction rooms. There's what they call a number 1 room and a number 2 room. The number 1 room is predominantly for the merino fleece and pieces, and the number 2 room is for the other wools, traditionally crossbred descriptions or carding descriptions. So auctions are usually over 2 days. There could be, say, 40,000 bales nationally for a week, split up between Fremantle, Melbourne, and Sydney. So Melbourne might be offering 20,000, 25,000 bales for the week over 2 days, over 2 rooms. So the auction would not go probably maybe 2 or 3 hours in each room per day, as an estimate.
Yeah, and I understand that actually the auction itself is then done by individual broking companies. Correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you don't do that.
4 or 5. We have 4 or 5 broken customers, and they will sell their respective catalogues as per an agreed schedule or timetable, roster system.
And I always see 3 people in front of the classroom, so to say. What are their different roles?
Well, then you have the auctioneer, and then either side of him are the other clerks, and one will be a senior clerk, and he will be instructing the auctioneer on the prices that are to be accepted or passed in. To the side, what you probably won't see, Elisabeth, is someone capturing those prices electronically, and that's where AWH come in. We capture all the prices that are made, and we transmit them to the AWH and then to ourselves for buyer invoicing overnight. So they're the respective roles on the rostrum, the auction rostrum.
Okay, and what do the buyers? What kind of things do they say? Do they cry out numbers, or do they just call their name? What do they say?
No, it's always in numbers. So so the auctioneer might call lot number 1. So he'll say lot number 1 and 500, and then one of the wool buyers might shout out 450 cents or 450, and then another buyer might shout 2, and the other one might shout 3, 4, and all of a sudden, when the bidding stops, the price is 454, and whoever was the last person to make that price, announce that price, the auctioneer identifies him and sells the lot and drops the hammer.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. And one last question, why is it called open cry? Like, why is there the word cry in there? Do you know the history of that word?
Well, the open cry is all people are free to cry or shout their price. On quite a few occasions when bidding is very intense, you may have 2 or 3 buyers shouting exactly the same price at any given time. So the word cry is to shout or to make a public announcement.
Okay.
It can get quite animated.
Okay. Yeah, I have to. You can watch the auction, but only from the outside, right? So you might not always hear exactly what people say, or can people also listen to the auction?
Yeah, for the uninitiated, it's quite difficult to understand, but after a short time, you start to pick up what's going on.
Okay, perfect. And you already mentioned that you record the prices and you transfer them. So how does the actual transaction of money work?
Okay, that's a little bit complex to explain, but I'll have a go for you. Once the wool is sold, ownership of the wool transfers from the seller to the buyer on the fall of the hammer. But he has what we call up until a certain date to make a payment for the wool, which is what we call the prompt date. And that prompt date is usually the Friday following the wool sale week. So after each auction, we will generate invoices on a Wednesday night or a Thursday night. The wool buyers will then have up until the following Friday to make payment. This is usually done by electronic transfer. Once the funds are received by us, we are then in a position to release the wool to the wool buyer's instruction. So there are incentives. If the wool buyer chooses to pay early, the brokers will offer a earlier payment discount. And there's also a penalty if he goes over the prompt date. There's a penalty interest incurred for a late payment. And then the funds are transmitted to the brokers each day, and then they account sale usually on the Friday following the Monday following the prompt is when they account sale.
And then they pay their customers, which are the wool growers. That's
right. Yeah, the brokers will then pay their wool growers via we'll transmit the money to the brokers, and the brokers will then make payment to the growers.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for giving all those detailed explanations. Now let's also talk about something that you have, which is called the electronic spec, or it's in short also e-spec. What exactly is that?
What that is, Elisabeth, we traditionally the wool clashing in the shed at the conclusion of shearing. A summary of the wool clip is documented in the wool book as shearing progresses. But at the end of shearing, all of that information is put into what we call a wool classes specification, and that's pretty much how the wool grower would like the wool to be sold in its respective lots, and that's done in conjunction with the broker. Now, this is a automated document, not an automated, it's a handwritten document that's been done forever and a day. With today's technology, there is the ability to have all of this electronic data capture being done on farm. Now, we have a little bit of a challenge here in Australia because it's such a large country. Not all wool growers are always going to be in range of a transmission or on their phone. But what we're trying to encourage, and we're making moves towards this, and we're not the only ones, mind you. The Australian Wool Exchange are dabbling in this. Australian Wool Innovation are trying to go down this path. But we're certainly encouraging, or wanting to encourage to get wool growers to be able to electronically place the wool clip information into an electronic format so that it can be transmitted to us. And we can have that information much faster than we currently do.
And what is the uptake by wool growers and wool classes on it?
Well, there was a very strong attempt a few years ago to have a big sales push on this, and it was poorly accepted at that time. But we feel that the environment's now right to have another go at trying to influence the grower to use this new medium. But it's going to take a bit of time. But certainly the technology's there, and we can actually. The best thing for us, Elisabeth, is to have the wool classes specification arrive before the wool, and that's what we're wanting to try and achieve.
So yeah, making everything along the supply chain more efficient and also
efficient,
less
faster,
and less failures, I guess, or mistakes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, but that's all about automation and technology. So warehouses have already included a lot of automation and technology. And tell us, what kind of technologies have you made to your wool services?
We've not made a lot of automation changes, Elisabeth, and there's a couple of reasons behind that. The electronic specification is now leading into RFID technology for identifying bales of wool. But the big, probably the things that we've employed in recent times is the introduction of stack racking or racking of wool, which has reduced our physical footprint in a number of our higher roofed stores. That would be one advantage that we've probably introduced in recent years. The other is the sortation machine, particularly in our bigger centres. Traditionally, the wool is sorted by hand, but these large sort machines do this all automatically. We certainly want to embrace automation, but as you can appreciate, Elisabeth, there's some fairly significant capital costs in doing that, and we've got 14 sites across the country, so it would become an enormous cost to us to try and get automation into all of our stores. But it's certainly not beyond the realm of doing it in some of our larger stores, and it's certainly of interest to us in conjunction with RFID technology.
Yeah. And we already talked to Mark Grave from AWH, and he already talked about RFID and the work that's going on there. So that's really exciting.
We are we're quite aware of what Mark's doing. I mean, we talk quite often with Mark and his team, and we're looking forward to doing some trial work with them again. We've done some trial work with them in the past, and we really look forward to helping them in their next round of trials, which I think should be this year. So we'll see how that all unfolds.
Yeah, excellent. And do you see anything in particular changing in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to the services that you offer?
That's a really hard one, Elisabeth, I think the biggest change that I see coming will be the electronic identification of wool. And I think we're very close, and we will probably see that certainly within the next 5 years. And that's going to help us a lot, but it was certainly going to help the mills, the processing mills or the scourers, enormously. And having a little bit of experience in how wool's prepared prior to processing or scouring, it's going to be a big help for those guys. The other thing too, with that electronic identification will be the supporting data that will go with it. And data is certainly a buzzword at the moment, and we certainly see that as the future in the near term. Yeah.
Okay, and now we talked a lot about the wool in your wool store and at auction, but let's also talk about the export side of exporting raw wool. So what would be regulatory requirements for exporting wool that we typically wouldn't be aware of?
There's no regulatory requirements that I'm aware of, apart from standard health certificates and appropriate documentation, providing a lot of wool that's traded on letters of credit. Providing they meet those terms, then everything should be okay to go through. What we are seeing, Elisabeth, is we're seeing a fairly rapid decline in the percentage of wool that's dumped to go overseas, and that's the compaction of wool. Traditionally, wool's been dumped into a 20-foot container and sent to Europe. And probably in the last more recent times, when we've seen the change from Europe to China, we're seeing a lot of 40-foot containers going back to China at a similar rate, sea freight rate, as 20-footers, and they can pack the same amount of wool in them without having to pay for dumping costs. So there's certainly a move afoot there that we're certainly keeping an eye on.
Dumping means that you compress the wool even further.
Yeah, we squeeze 2 or 3 bales into the size of one, so therefore we can make more kilos per cubic metre in a 20-foot container. So I think what are we put? I think it's about 21 tonne into dumped into a 20-foot container. We would only, if we didn't dump that, we'd probably only get half of that volume in. So there's a significant saving there, but we get the same volume or the same weight into a 40-foot container without dumping that. So and the sea freight back to China is quite attractive. Australia's importing a lot of goods now from China, and we see an imbalance in 40-foot containers into this country. So the backloading rates back to China are quite attractive.
Yeah, you already. My question was how many bales fit into one container. So you said you can already compress 3 into one, but how many bales would it then be, dumped and non-dumped? Okay,
so the 2 traditional methods of packing are dumping 20-foot, and we're doing 21 tonne there. So you're looking at about between 115 to 120 bales dumped into a 20-foot container. Or you can get the same quantity of wool into a 40-foot container, loose packed, without dumping.
And how many containers would typically leave Australia with wool in a year?
Oh wow! Okay, well we probably need to do a bit of mathematics here, Elisabeth. Let's assume there's 2 million bales sold at auction each year, and let's assume that every container will take 115 bales. That would leave about 17,000 containers, 20 or 40 foot, leaving Australia every year.
Wow, that's a big number. And majority goes to China, and then the rest goes to Europe.
Most
India.
about I think it's about 80% now would be going to China, and a little bit to India and Europe. Of course, there's a little bit of local processing too. We still have a little bit of local processing here in Australia, but predominantly China is the big market for greasy wool.
Okay. Now, before we come to a close, I have one more personal question, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here because I didn't tell you about this one. Can you tell me what is your favorite aspect about wool or the wool industry?
Without a doubt, the people that you work with.
Okay. Because they're so
people
passionate?
People that you work with. No, they are... I don't know how you would describe it, but you could call the industry a very big family. And whilst we all compete in certain parts, we all have great respect for each other. The customers are very well established names, and it's just a pleasure to deal with people in the wool industry, without a doubt.
Yeah, I tend to agree. That's true. It's a wonderful industry to work in. Now, where can our listeners find out more about AWH? Where should they go?
Well, the traditional place is the website, which we looking to update at the moment, and that's www.awh.com.au. And people are free to contact us or contact myself in any way, shape or form, and see if we can help them. But mostly our customers in the wool are brokers on the selling side, and Australian wool exporters on the buying, exporting side. So we don't take any positions in trading or procuring raw wool for customers. We are complete logistics service provider for wool brokers and wool exporters.
So you know exactly who your customers are and probably know them all by name, which is also very unique.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really unique business model as well. Very small customer base, but very intense. Well, thank you so much, David. I really appreciate you explaining me everything that you do. It was really interesting. And I hope to be talking to you again in the future.
Well, thank you for having me and the opportunity to talk to you today. And I hope you get some good feedback from this interview. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview with David Mitchell from AWH. If you want to find out more about David or about AWH, then I invite you to head on over to the show notes and have a look at elisabethvandelden.com/069. Once again, elisabethvandelden.com/069. If you are active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter or LinkedIn, then make sure to follow us on these platforms so that you are always alerted when a new podcast is coming out. I look forward to connecting with you there. Thank you and bye for now.